Is this what you really want? The bridal shop attendant asked, her hand smoothing the lace across my shoulders. I stared into the mirror, and for a moment, I saw everything I had always imagined: ivory silk, delicate beading, and the reflection of a woman who was supposed to be stepping into the happiest chapter of her life. I forced a smile, even though my stomach nodded. That was the first time I remember hearing the whisper in my head, "Is this really love? Or am I trying to convince myself?" When I first met Daniel, he was everything my heart thought it wanted. He had that disarming smile, the kind of voice that made you lean in closer just to hear him better, and the ability to make even a crowded room feel like it was only the two of us. I still remember the first night we talked. It was at my cousin's engagement party. He made me laugh so hard I nearly spilled champagne on my dress. From that evening on, he became my anchor, the man who held my hand through storms and told me I was his safe place. In those early months, I built my world around him. Every text from him lit me up. Every plan he made me feel chosen. My friends teased me for being so swept away, but I didn't care. After years of relationships that ended in disappointment, I thought I had finally been found. Not just loved, but cherished. And when he proposed, down on one knee with trembling hands and eyes that looked wet with tears, I didn't hesitate. I said yes. How could I not? Planning the wedding became my obsession. I carried binders filled with inspiration, flowers, color palettes, cake designs. My mother and I stayed up late comparing centerpiece ideas, and even my younger brother got roped into folding invitation envelopes. Daniel would sit with me, pretending to care about fonts and music lists, though I knew his patience was thin. "You're the expert," he'd laugh. "I trust your vision." I took that as a compliment, as proof that he believed in me. But looking back, that was the first dismissal I overlooked. He trusted me to plan it all, not because he admired my eye for detail, but because the wedding wasn't his priority. His phone buzzed during those evenings, sometimes twice, sometimes more. He'd step out, claiming it was work, or that his mother needed him. And I believed him, because that's what love meant, right? Trusting without question. Still, the cracks began to show. There were nights when I waited at our favorite restaurant for over an hour, watching the candles burn low, while he sent a rushed message. "Stuck at the office, so sorry." I'd force a smile when the waiter asked if I wanted to order anyway, and I'd pack the food into boxes to take home. When he finally arrived, later than promised, he'd kiss my forehead and apologize, his excuses wrapped in tenderness. And I let him. Every single time, I let him. My best friend Lila didn't. She raised her eyebrows, her tone sharp when she said, "Don't you think it's strange? He's always busy, always somewhere else. You deserve someone who shows up." I laughed it off, told her she didn't understand him the way I did. Maybe I was defending him, or maybe I was defending my own dream, terrified of watching it collapse. There were smaller signs, too, like how he suddenly changed his phone password one evening, brushing it off as a security update. Or how he'd get irritated if I asked to see pictures from his business trips. "Why don't you trust me?" he snapped once, his voice sharper than I had ever heard. I apologized instead of pressing further. Somehow I felt guilty for doubting him, as if love meant ignoring the questions that clawed at my heart. And yet, even in the middle of these doubts, I clung to the wedding. I chose peonies over roses, a string quartet over a DJ, and an ivory gown that I thought would take his breath away. I told myself these details mattered because the marriage mattered. If I could build the perfect day, then surely the rest of our lives would fall into place. The night we toured the venue, I walked into the ballroom and saw chandeliers dripping with crystals, their light scattering across the polished floor like diamonds. I closed my eyes and pictured walking down that aisle toward him, every eye watching, every promise waiting. For a heartbeat, I believed in it completely, believed in us, but then his phone rang again. He stepped outside, his voice low, his back turned to me. I stood there in that glittering hall, pretending not to notice, pretending not to hear the muffled urgency in his tone. When he returned, his smile was rehearsed, his hand slightly cold in mine. I wanted to ignore it. I wanted so desperately to believe that I was marrying the man I thought I knew. But a quiet ache settled in my chest, one I couldn't shake, because Daniel wasn't just busy. He wasn't just distracted. He was hiding something, and soon I would find out exactly what and who it was. "Who's Emily?" My voice trembled as I held up the receipt I found in his jacket pocket. It was for a dinner reservation, 2 entrees, 2 glasses of wine, 1 dessert, on a night he had sworn he was buried in late meetings. Daniel didn't flinch. He didn't even look guilty. He just leaned back in his chair, smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth, and said, "You're overthinking again." It was work. "Do you really want to start a fight over nothing?" The humiliation hit me harder than any admission of guilt would have. His words made me feel small, irrational, like I was the one sabotaging the happiness we were building. I forced myself to fold the receipt into my palm, to nod like I believed him, but inside, the crack had split wide open. From that night on, my world tilted. Every time his phone buzzed, I heard suspicion instead of routine. He'd angle the screen away from me, mutter something about deadlines or his boss, then slip outside to take the call. I told myself it was work. That was who Daniel was, ambitious, hardworking, always striving for the next promotion. That's what I wanted to believe. But my gut, my instinct, whispered something else. I tried to silence it. After all, how could I doubt the man who once surprised me with roses on a rainy Tuesday, who whispered, "You're the best thing that ever happened to me," when I was half asleep? How could I question the man I had built an entire wedding around? And yet, every doubt I buried came clawing back in sharper ways. Lila, my best friend, caught me staring at Daniel one night when he was glued to his phone. She didn't even lower her voice when she said, "You're really going to marry a man who treats you like a background character?" Daniel looked up, offended, but I defended him. I always defended him. "He's just stressed," I said. "You don't know how hard he works." The look she gave me was pity wrapped in disappointment. And that hurt more than her words. It wasn't just Lila. Even my mother tried to hint gently, asking, "Sweetheart, are you sure he's as ready for this marriage as you are?" I laughed it off, insisted she was overthinking. But deep down, her words stuck, replaying in the back of my mind during the long nights I spent waiting for Daniel to come home. The strangest part was how he'd turn my suspicions against me. One evening, I asked why he was home so late. His response was a sharp, "Why don't you trust me? Do you really think I'd lie to you?" His tone carried both anger and hurt, making me feel like the villain in my own story. I apologized. I always apologized. And he rewarded me with a kiss, a hug, a murmured, "I love you." That made me feel foolish for doubting him at all, but the cracks were spreading faster than I could plaster them. It was a Tuesday when the first undeniable sign appeared. Daniel left for a business dinner, dressed in a crisp navy suit that smelled faintly of cologne he never wore around me. I tried to ignore the twisting in my chest, but later that night, when I picked up the dry cleaning, the attendant handed me a silk scarf with our ticket. It wasn't mine, and it smelled like perfume, sweet, expensive, undeniably feminine. I remember gripping it so tightly in my fist that the fabric wrinkled. A part of me wanted to march home, hold it up, demand answers. But another part, the quieter, more calculating part of me, told me to wait, to watch, to gather proof before I confronted him. That night, I lay awake beside him, his body warm against mine, his breathing steady in sleep. I stared at the ceiling, clutching the scarf beneath the blanket, and asked myself the question I'd been avoiding for months. What if everything I thought I had with him was a lie? My wedding binder sat on the nightstand, tabs sticking out like colorful promises. Peonies, ivory gowns, sparkling chandeliers. It all mocked me now. Each detail a reminder of how badly I wanted the dream to be real. I closed my eyes and whispered, "Maybe it's still worth saving." But even as I said it, I didn't believe it anymore. The next morning, Daniel kissed my cheek before leaving for an early meeting. I watched him drive away, then pulled the scarf from my purse. I pressed it to my face, breathing in the perfume of another woman, and knew the truth I had been denying. He was hiding something, and for the first time, I wasn't going to look away. That was the moment the shift happened, the moment suspicion turned into determination. I decided I would stop waiting for the truth to reveal itself. I would find it. Quietly, carefully, without him knowing, I would uncover who he was really meeting at night. "Do you recognize this scarf?" I asked, holding it up between my fingers like a piece of evidence in a trial. Daniel froze, halfway through tying his tie, his reflection caught in the mirror. For a split second, I saw panic flicker across his face before he smoothed it into that same calm, dismissive smile he always used when he thought he could control me. "Baby, it's just a mistake," he said, turning to kiss my forehead, as if affection could erase the scent of another woman's perfume still clinging to the silk. But this time, I didn't fold. I tucked the scarf into my purse instead, letting silence hang between us. That silence was heavier than shouting, sharper than accusations. It told him one thing clearly: I wasn't going to be fooled again. That night, when he claimed another business dinner, I followed. I can still remember the way my heart pounded as I trailed his car through the city streets. Every red light felt like an eternity. Every turn he took a chance I might lose him. My palms were slick against the steering wheel, but I couldn't stop. The truth was out there, and for once, I wasn't going to let it hide. He parked outside a quiet restaurant, the kind with dim lighting and candles flickering on every table. I waited in my car, breath fogging the glass until I saw him step out. And then I saw her. At first, I thought it was a stranger, tall, elegant, wearing a dress I'd never seen before. But when she turned, when the light caught her face, my stomach dropped. It wasn't a stranger. It was Lila, my best friend. The betrayal hit me harder than if it had been anyone else. This wasn't just my fiancé sneaking around. It was the one person I trusted with my secrets, my laughter, my tears. The woman who once helped me pick out centerpiece colors for my wedding was now holding hands with the man I was supposed to marry. I wanted to storm into that restaurant, flip the table, scream until every candle flickered out. But instead, I watched. I watched him lean in close, watched her laugh at jokes that used to be mine, watched them share a dessert with 2 spoons like we once did. And all the while, I sat frozen, my hands shaking on my lap, my eyes burning with tears that refused to fall. When they finally left, I followed again. They didn't notice me trailing behind, too wrapped up in each other's whispers and touches. And when they pulled into a hotel parking lot, my last sliver of hope shattered. I didn't confront them that night. Instead, I drove home in silence, the scarf still in my purse like a cruel souvenir. My house felt colder than ever, the wedding binder on the table mocking me with its glittering tabs and perfect plans. Peonies, ivory gowns, sparkling chandeliers, it all looked like a fairy tale written for a fool. The next morning, Daniel walked into the kitchen with that same smile, kissing me as if nothing had happened. "I'll be late tonight," he said casually, pouring himself coffee. I stared at him, wondering how a man could lie so smoothly while standing in the home we built together. I couldn't stop myself. "Did you have fun with Lila?" I asked, my voice calm, too calm. His hand froze mid-pour. The coffee spilled over the rim of the mug, dripping onto the counter. "What are you talking about?" he muttered, but his eyes betrayed him. "I saw you," I said simply. "Dinner, dessert, hotel." His face drained of color, then hardened into anger. "You followed me?" he snapped, turning it back on me as always. Do you know how insane that sounds? For the first time, I didn't apologize. I didn't beg him to explain or let his words twist the blame onto me. I stood there in silence, letting him drown in it. The scarf slipped from my purse onto the counter between us, its perfume filling the room like poison. He grabbed it, cursed under his breath, and stormed out the door without another word. The humiliation cut deeper than I thought I could bear. My best friend, my fiancé, together, behind my back, while I planned a wedding meant to celebrate love and loyalty. It wasn't just betrayal, it was mockery, a performance they played while I was left clinging to the script of a fairy tale that never existed. That night, I sat at the kitchen table staring at the empty chair across from me. I thought about every sign I ignored, every excuse I accepted, every moment I defended them both. Rage and sorrow twisted together in my chest, but beneath it all, something else began to form. Something colder, sharper, because in that silence I realized something important. They thought they had broken me. They thought I would collapse, humiliated and powerless, too weak to fight back. But they were wrong. The cracks had become an earthquake, shattering the illusion I clung to. And from those pieces, I began to build something new. Not desperation. Not denial, but resolve. I didn't know exactly how yet. But one thing was certain. Daniel and Lila weren't the only ones who could play this game. The first morning after the confrontation, I stood in front of the mirror, staring at a face I barely recognized. My mascara had bled into dark shadows under my eyes, my lips were cracked from crying through the night, and my hair fell in tangled waves. But what haunted me most wasn't my reflection, it was the silence in the room. No text from him, no apology, no explanation. He had chosen her. He had chosen betrayal. And I was left holding the shattered pieces of what was supposed to be my happily ever after. For days, I sank into that silence. I replayed every conversation, every smile, every "I love you" he had whispered. Had they all been lies? Or was I simply too blind, too desperate to believe in the fairy tale I thought I was living? At night, I lay awake, my chest heavy with humiliation. Friends messaged, asking if the wedding was still on, and I couldn't even bring myself to reply. How do you admit that the man you defended so fiercely had been sneaking behind your back with someone you trusted? One night, while scrolling aimlessly through old photos on my phone, I stopped at a picture of us at my parents' house. I remembered that day vividly. My father had pulled me aside and whispered, "Are you sure about him? Something about his eyes doesn't sit right with me." I had brushed it off, laughed even, telling him that love was about trust. And now, his words cut deeper than ever. The weight of humiliation pressed harder when my mother tried to comfort me. "Darling, maybe you should just let this go quietly. Spare yourself the gossip." That suggestion lit a fire in me. Let it go quietly? After giving everything, my heart, my loyalty, my future? No. Silence had always been my weakness. I remembered all the times I had stayed quiet, swallowing my pain when friends disrespected me, when coworkers dismissed my ideas, when relatives compared me to others as if I was never enough. Every time I had chosen silence, I had shrunk a little more. Not this time. The next morning, I did something that surprised even me. I slipped off the engagement ring and placed it on the table. It was heavy, not with gold, but with betrayal. That act felt symbolic, like I was shedding a weight that had chained me to lies. When he finally called, his voice was sharp, almost annoyed. "Why are you making a scene? You're blowing this out of proportion." I remember the pause before I answered, the way my breath steadied. "No, you blew our life apart the moment you chose her. I'm just choosing not to stay broken." And that's when the transformation began. It wasn't sudden, like flipping a switch. It was slow, painful, but deliberate. I started with small steps, blocking his number, telling close friends the truth, returning vendors' calls to cancel the wedding. Each action felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. At first, people pitied me. I could see it in their eyes, hear it in their hushed voices. Poor thing. Such a tragedy. But as the days turned into weeks, pity gave way to something else. Respect. They saw that I wasn't hiding. I wasn't retreating. I was facing the wreckage head-on. The hardest part was exposing the truth about who he had betrayed me with. The other woman, my own coworker, someone who had sat across from me during lunch breaks, who had smiled at me as though we were allies. Revealing that to friends and family was like reopening the wound again and again, but I refused to let them rewrite the story into whispers behind my back. If anyone was going to control the narrative, it would be me. I can still recall the moment I walked into my parents' house and told them everything. My mother gasped, clutching her chest, while my father's jaw tightened, his eyes filled with both fury and sorrow. For the first time, I didn't feel like a foolish little girl seeking their approval. I felt like a woman finally standing in her truth. My father's words this time were different. He placed his hand on my shoulder and said, "You're stronger than I realized, and stronger than he ever deserved." The transformation wasn't just emotional, it was practical too. I revisited goals I had abandoned for him, the art classes I had always wanted to take, the solo trip I'd put on hold. I began to see that my life didn't collapse with the engagement. It expanded. Each sleepless night I had spent grieving slowly turned into nights of planning, not for a wedding, but for my future on my own terms. My ex and the woman he chose expected me to disappear quietly, humiliated and silenced. But instead, I shocked them by showing up stronger, louder, and unbreakable. When mutual friends relayed that he had called me bitter for speaking out, I didn't even flinch. Let him paint me bitter if he wanted. Because the truth was, bitterness had been burned away, replaced with clarity and resolve. I realized something powerful. My story wasn't ending with betrayal. It was just beginning with empowerment. And the woman who once clung to silence was gone. In her place stood someone ready to fight back, to rise above, and to reclaim not just her dignity, but her power. And with every step forward, one thought consumed me. If he thought my silence was his shield, he had no idea what storm was coming next. I can still remember the look on his face the moment my voice cut through the room. It was at a mutual friends gathering, one of those cozy dinners where laughter clinks against wine glasses and everyone pretends life is simple. He hadn't expected me to show up. He hadn't expected me to sit across the table, calm and collected, as though the wreckage he left me in hadn't even touched me. And he definitely hadn't expected me to open my mouth when someone casually asked, "So, how's the wedding planning going?" The entire room froze. His fork clattered against the plate, and the woman sitting next to him, shifted uneasily, her cheeks turning crimson. That was the moment I leaned back, smiled, and said, "There's no wedding?" You see, my fiancé forgot to mention that he was already busy planning a life with someone else. Conveniently, the woman he was seeing sat right here at this table. The silence was deafening. I could feel the air crackle with shock, with pity, with judgment. He stammered, his hands fumbling for words. But I didn't need to raise my voice or throw a glass of wine in his face like some melodramatic scene. My truth was enough. Watching his carefully built facade crumble under the weight of honesty was the revenge I never knew I needed. For so long, I thought revenge had to look like cruelty, tearing someone down, making them bleed the way they made me bleed. But in that moment, I realized the sweetest revenge is dignity. It's letting them drown in the truth they thought you'd be too weak to tell. He tried to confront me later that night, pulling me aside, his voice dripping with bitterness. "You embarrassed me," he hissed. I looked him straight in the eye and replied, "No, you embarrassed yourself. I just stopped protecting your lies." That became my mantra. Every time I felt the old humiliation creeping in, I reminded myself, I am not responsible for his shame. He is, and I won't carry it anymore. The days that followed became a blur of whispered gossip. Some people avoided me, afraid of getting too close to the drama. Others reached out, women mostly, sharing their own stories of betrayal. "You're brave," one said. "You said what I never could." That was when I realized my story wasn't just mine anymore. By reclaiming my voice, I was giving silent women permission to find theirs too. Meanwhile, his life began to unravel. Word spread quickly at work, and since my coworker was part of it all, their reputations suffered. Promotions they once bragged about slipped out of reach, friendships cooled, respect turned to ridicule. I didn't have to lift a finger. The fallout was its own kind of justice, but I wasn't content to sit back and watch. I took deliberate steps to build a life that was undeniably mine. I went on that solo trip I had once postponed. I filled my days with new experiences, classes, and people who didn't see me as someone's fiancé or someone's victim, but simply as me. Each moment of independence became a quiet act of rebellion against the woman I had been, the woman who once thought she couldn't breathe without him. There was one moment, though, that sealed my freedom in a way I'll never forget. Months after everything exploded, I bumped into him at the grocery store. He looked smaller somehow, weighed down by the consequences of his own choices. He tried to smile, tried to pretend we were old friends. "You look good," he said, as though those words could erase everything. I looked down at the basket in my hand, filled with fresh flowers, ingredients for a dinner I was making for myself, not for anyone else. And I smiled, not at him, but at the life I had carved out. "I know," I said simply before walking away. That was the moment I knew I was free, because revenge isn't always about watching someone burn. Sometimes it's about walking away with your head high, knowing they can no longer touch you. It's the freedom to live without their shadow darkening your light. My dream wedding never happened. And thank God it didn't. Because it was never really my dream. It was a script I thought I had to follow. My real dream was something I didn't even know I was chasing. Self-respect, independence, and a future built on truth, not lies. If you've ever been betrayed, if you've ever felt like your whole world crumbled beneath you, know this: the pieces you pick up will shape someone stronger, someone wiser, someone unbreakable. And one day, like me, you'll look back and realize that the ending you feared was the beginning you needed. If you've ever been betrayed and found your strength in the pain, you know exactly how this feels. Subscribe to my channel for more stories like this, because none of us are ever truly alone in what we've lived through.